I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today to hear what we have to say about a very important issue and a crisis that's in this country. I know that there's so many issues that you're all concerned about because there's a lot going on to attract you and to have you cover. But I'd like to say, first of all, good afternoon to everyone, and again, thank you for coming. As we come together during this year's Democratic Issues Conference, committee Democrats are here today to sound the alarm on our nation's worsening affordable housing and homelessness crisis. Nationwide, there's a shortage of 14 million homes for rent or purchase, creating mounting affordability pressures. As a result, a record number of renters and homeowners are paying a greater share of their income on housing than ever before. That means that it's much over 30%. You're talking about 50% of income now that may be going for housing. Meanwhile, over 650,000 people are experiencing homelessness on any given night in the United States, as millions more are just one crisis away from becoming homeless themselves. So let's be very clear. It doesn't have to be this way. Unfortunately, for far too long, federal spending on housing has lagged behind growing need among families. In fact, since 2019, the federal government has spent less than 1% of the entire federal budget on housing. This is absolutely unacceptable. The good news is Democrats really do care about housing. That's why when I was chair of the Housing Financial Services Committee, the last Congress, we worked closely with President Biden to draft the housing bill, the title of which was Build Back Better. The Build Back Better Act that would have invested over $150 billion in fair and affordable housing. While House Democrats passed the bill in short order, the Senate unfortunately did not, and housing investments were stripped from what became the Inflation Reduction Act that passed last year. So yes, we're disappointed that housing has continually been left on the cutting room floor, but this president and committee Democrats have not given up, and we're going to finish the job when it comes to affordable housing, while extreme MAGA Republicans continue their efforts to defund federal housing programs and seem to be more concerned with kissing up to the twice impeached, 4 times criminally indicted former President Trump than they are with housing their own communities where homelessness is increasing. While Trump made very clear during his tenure that he wants to round up and arrest people simply because they're homeless, Democrats continue to offer effective and humane solutions. This Congress, I proudly reintroduced with many of my colleagues right here today a massive legislative package that would represent the single largest and most comprehensive investment in fair and affordable housing in United States history. This includes the Housing Crisis Response Act, which represents the housing investments that were previously included in Build Back Better Act, would invest more than $150 billion in fair and affordable housing. Investments to create nearly 1.4 million affordable and accessible homes, reduce housing costs for all, and help address stubborn core inflation. The next bill is the Ending Homelessness Act, which would end homelessness and significantly reduce poverty by transforming the Housing Choice Voucher Program into a federal entitlement so that every household who qualifies for this assistance could receive it. And then, of course, the Down Payment Toward Equity Act, which would help revive the dream of home ownership for all by providing $100 billion in direct assistance to help find and help first-time, first-generation home buyers cover down payments, closing costs, and buy down mortgage interest rates. So we were very pleased today when we heard Vice President Harris indicate very clearly that housing is the top priority. And as America inches closer to November, Democrats are making sure housing is treated as such. Right now, we're watching as the housing crisis is having major effects on our nation's economy. Based on the latest inflation data, housing costs made up nearly 70% of stubborn core inflation. Families across the country need to know that we're fighting every day to solve this urgent crisis and build on the economic progress Democrats have made under the Biden administration. In addition to this historic legislation, as ranking member, I'm announcing today that I will be launching a new initiative to work alongside Democratic members in the House and local officials to lower the cost of development and reduce other local barriers to fair and affordable housing. This includes working with communities to improve building codes, streamline permitting processes, eliminate restrictive zoning, and other policies that only benefit those such as NIMBY, that is, not in my backyard, who seek to block housing progress. We know there are evidence-based solutions to end this crisis, and we've seen some communities put their solutions into action. For example, the City of Houston has adopted the Housing First model to end homelessness by launching highly effective outreach teams to get people into permanent supportive housing, which has resulted in a 63% reduction in homelessness since 2011. That's more than any of the other 10 largest cities in the United States. And not only that, but it is more humane and effective than costly strategies that seek to criminalize people experiencing homelessness. So with that, I will call on my colleagues in Congress on both sides of the aisle to join me and my fellow committee Democrats to get my legislative housing package across the finish line and make safe, fair, and affordable housing a reality for all. With that, I'd like you to hear from some of the other members of our Financial Services Committee and other committees that may have joined us here today. I first wanted to have Mr. Cleaver, and I think he has not made it yet, but he is the subcommittee chair of housing and insurance. So I'll move on to Congressman Sherman, who is from the greater Los Angeles area. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. And I've spent 28 years on the Financial Services Committee under the leadership of Maxine Waters. Three big things. First, as our past and future chairwoman stated, we need her Housing Crisis Response Act of 2023. Second, we need lower interest rates, and we need to see those soon. And third, as the future chairwoman pointed out, we have to deal with the NIMBYs who prevent the construction of affordable housing. All too often, cities are saying, well, yes, you can build housing here, 4 units an acre. You pencil that out, you build 4 mansions. 4 mansions an acre is not a solution to the housing supply crisis. We have left this to local governments. My state is increasingly getting cities to have to change some of their calculus, and this is a national problem. We also have, as a part of that, the fiscalization of land use planning, where the way cities are financed gives them an incentive to have malls and mansions. Why? Because those produce more tax revenue for the city while having less fire and police protection needs. We don't particularly need more malls and mansions. We need more single family and especially multifamily housing. Couple of small things. One, HUD needs to, because has too high a rate for homeowners for mortgage insurance, and the people who are getting that mortgage insurance are almost overwhelmingly first-time home buyers and families of color. And second, That insurance should not be required for the whole life of the loan. Once you have a lot of equity in the home, that insurance is no longer needed to protect the lender. Second, a very specific issue, and that is the HUD-VASH program, which provides housing to veterans who are otherwise without housing. Unfortunately, this program is not available to, it's made available based on your income, but they unfortunately count in that income the disability payments made to disabled veterans. And so we have a circumstance in our area where they're building housing on a VA facility conveniently located next to the VA hospital, where the veterans who need hospital services most, those who are completely disabled, are barred because unfortunately our law counts in their income their VA disability benefits. I now have the pleasure of introducing, I guess, Mr. Himes, a longtime member of our committee.
Please introduce your full responsibility.
Thank you, Brad. I'm Jim Himes from the America's most confusingly named town, Coscob, Connecticut. And thank you, Ranking Member Waters, for calling us together to address this really critical problem. In the last Congress, before the House descended into ground zero of chaos and clown shows, I had the privilege of chairing the Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth. And after 2 years of work in the production of a major report and a documentary, which I commend to you, Grit and Grace, watch it, at the very top of the list of the things that we thought we could do to actually help address economic disparity and fairness and growth in this country was to very substantially increase the supply of housing in the United States. We have a dramatic supply shortfall, and you need to spend about 10 minutes in a high school economics class to understand that if your supply is constrained, prices will be too high. And this is true at every single level, from those families that need the most affordable housing, certainly in my community, which is an affluent community, well up into the upper middle class, where people not only can't afford the housing, but because they're paying 50 or 60% of their income, they are giving things like medications and food and education short shrift. And of course, that's a way of eating your seed corn and affecting the next generation's ability to live the American dream. So I am so happy that the ranking member has decided to really push this legislation, in particular the Housing Crisis Act, which would make stunning levels of resources available to actually address the supply problem. And it is time, frankly, for the committee to focus on that and for us to work with the Senate to get that passed. The second area, which both the ranking member and Congressman Sherman have referred to, is NIMBYism. The reality is that we're a little constrained at the federal level. We can provide more resources for supply. We can provide more subsidy for folks that might otherwise have a hard time paying the rent or buying their first home. But as long as local communities and states have zoning and local land use regulations that prohibit the construction of housing, there's not enough money in the world to solve this problem. Now, like so many economically vibrant areas in the United States, I don't have in my community a NIMBY problem. I have a banana problem. Banana stands for build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And as long as communities are stuck in the notion that it's going to forever alter the character of their communities, or that somehow additional housing is going to be a problem for them, we will not solve this issue. And last thing I want to say is that all over the country, communities are demonstrating the fact that if you build particularly density in the urban core around transportation hubs, mixed income, mixed use developments, what you're doing is you're building vibrant neighborhoods that people want to move to. 4 miles from my house in Stamford, Connecticut, we are building a city that is inclusive, that has mixed income, mixed retail, right on a major train line. That is the future, not just of our country, but of prosperity in the country. So again, thank you, Ranking Member Waters, for really highlighting this issue. If we don't act on it, we will not address the economic disparity that is the core of our party's reason for being. So thank you for your leadership on that issue, and it appears that we have not yet been joined by Ms. Beatty, so it's my pleasure to introduce from a state that will be getting a lot of attention in the very near future, and chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Horsford.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my honor to join with my colleagues. First, to thank our chairwoman and ranking member Waters for hosting this conference. She also had the most well-attended and robust panel discussion on housing, and really for your tireless advocacy for the issues that matter most to Americans, like housing and housing affordability and the crisis. And I really want to commend you because under your leadership as chair of the Financial Services Committee, you made sure housing was at the forefront of the agenda. And sadly, I'm on the Financial Services Committee, the subcommittee on housing and insurance, and under Republicans, they've had one hearing on housing this Congress. And that just shows you their dysfunction, the fact that they're not really focused on the issues that matter most to constituents across the country, and it's why we're focused on winning back our majority and making our priorities, which are the people's priorities, the agenda of the House. I want to commend the leader for her work. I'm proud to be a sponsor of all of her bills to address the housing crisis, including the root causes of the crisis, including the Housing Crisis Response Act, which provides $150 billion in fair and affordable investments. It would help create 1.4 million affordable and accessible homes. Nearly 300,000 families would be able to afford their rent under this legislation. So my district is in Las Vegas, Nevada's 4th district. I represent Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and central rural Nevada. My district covers 50,000 square miles. It's one of the larger congressional districts geographically. It's diverse demographically, and what it is, it's the representation of America. And so in addition to focusing on housing in urban areas, we also need to affect and improve housing in rural America as well. I also wanted to share with my colleagues that I literally just attended the homeless point in time count that we had with our local officials. And I went out 5 in the morning with our officials, first responders, to count the homeless in our community. It was one of the most humbling things that I've done as an elected official, to not only see the need. We have over 7,000 unhoused people every night in Las Vegas, but to also hear about the impact that homelessness is having on their quality of life, on their health care, on their mental health and other issues. That's why we need the legislation like the Ending Homelessness Act, which would end homelessness and significantly reduce poverty across our nation and in my district. It would help make the Housing Choice Voucher program more easily accessible for the families and individuals who need it the most. And it would also ban housing discrimination based on a veteran status or the source of income, like those who get Social Security or disability, like Mr. Sherman was talking about. Another bill that would address the racial wealth, prosperity, and homeownership gaps that we see across the country is the ranking member's Down Payment Towards Equity Act, which would directly assist first-generation home buyers in purchasing their first home. Obviously, buying a home is building equity. Building equity is building a legacy. And building a legacy is being able to pass something down to our children and our children's children. I'm the first in my family to buy a home, and to have that equity be able to be passed down to my children. That's the legacy that I want to leave, and that's the legacy that this legislation seeks to advance for all Americans, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their background. So these are the priorities that Democrats will put forward now and when we're back in the majority, and I want to commend the ranking member and all of my colleagues for their tremendous advocacy on these issues. And now I'll turn it to the vice chair of the committee, Representative Sylvia Garcia.
Thank you. I'm Sylvia Garcia, and I'm from Houston. And I want to thank the ranking member for all her work on putting all these bills together. And obviously, like many of us here at the podium, I too co-sponsor. And, you know, I'm going to keep it simple. Why are we doing this? Because it's important to not only have food on the table, but a roof over your head. And that crosses every sector, every state. Everybody has that same dream. It's part of the American dream, to be able to get a good job, to get an education, and to be able to afford your own home. In my community, we always take pride in saying, mi casa, su casa. I know y'all know Margarita, but I know you know. But you also know mi casa, su casa, right? And it simply says, my house is your house. There's a huge sense of pride when somebody gets a home. You know, they're feel like they're part of the fabric of the neighborhood. That's not just renting. They don't have to rely on a landlord to decide whether or not it's time to cut the grass or to fix the roof. It's their home that they can take care of. So all of these bills combined help get us to that, whether it's to be able to buy a home, whether it's able to just stay and get better rent or get rental assistance, whether it's just to keep programs to help house the homeless. It's all about it together. And that's why these pieces of legislation are so important. You know, I'm also sit on the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, and he's absolutely right. We've had more hearings on insurance issues and other issues and only one on housing, but it's not about public housing. It's not about Section 8. It's not about vouchers. It's not about homelessness. It's not about anything that we're talking about, and that's taking care of people. People are our greatest asset. I mean, we can have all the banks in the world and everything else that we do in financial services, but if we don't take care of our people, then that doesn't really help keep our economy going. So for me in Texas, and I think the chairwoman's already mentioned, Houston is doing a good job, but we got to keep going and make sure that we stay on track, because our homeless issue is still very, very large. And we also have a shortage of housing, particularly first start housing, new workforce housing. The focus has been on development and going for the big homes. You know, you get more bang for the buck, you get higher taxes, but it's pushing out a lot of people. In Texas, the minimum wage is 7.25 cents an hour. So the average renter needs to be making $25 to rent a 2-bedroom home. So they'd have to have almost 3.5 jobs to be able to rent a home. And I've seen a lot of people with 2 jobs and 3 jobs, but there's not enough time in a day for 3.5. So while Texas is doing better, we're still lacking, especially since we are a border state. There still have issues related to access for Spanish language, because of Spanish language barriers, just flat out discrimination. The old red lining still exists for many minority populations. And some of our programs, because of mixed status families, people are just not eligible for. There's this myth that immigrants are zapping our social services or taking money away from Americans. It's just a myth, y'all. It doesn't happen that way, and certainly not in Texas. So I'm pleased to be here with all these members supporting these bills, because it really is what will help us not only in the short term by helping people, but in the long term in helping the economy. Thank you, and I yield now to Congressman Nickel.
Hi everyone, I'm Wiley Nickel. I represent North Carolina's 13th District, and I have one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing congressional districts in the country. Housing is the top issue for the people that I represent in Congress. And under Maxine Waters' leadership, House Democrats are putting people over politics to bring down the cost of housing. And really glad to be here again with my fellow members of the House Financial Services Committee. I serve on the Capital Markets Subcommittee, the Digital Assets Subcommittee, and the National Security Subcommittee. Right now, more than 343,000 households in North Carolina spend over half of their money, their monthly income, on rent, leaving too little for other expenses like healthcare, transportation, and healthy food. Access to safe and affordable housing is essential to the well-being of working families in North Carolina and throughout the country. That's why Financial Services Committee Democrats are working to increase the supply of affordable housing and to lower the cost of living for working families. Financial Services Committee Democrats are fighting for initiatives like the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, the Home Investment Program, the Self-Help and Assisted Home Ownership Opportunity Program, the Public Housing Fund, Section 202 Housing, and rental assistance. We are also working to pass common sense legislation like Ranking Member Waters' Down Payment Toward Equity Act to help address racial wealth and home ownership gaps by providing $100 billion in direct assistance to help first-time, first-generation home buyers purchase their first home, getting their chance at the American dream. I'm going to continue to put forth common sense ideas and solutions to build more affordable housing, increase affordable housing access, and to tackle this housing crisis. Now I'd like to turn it over to my friend from the great state of Colorado, Congresswoman Brittany Pedersen.
All right. I'm always at the end since I'm the freshman, so you all are almost ready, free to go, but great to see you all here. My name is Brittany Pedersen. I represent Colorado's 7th Congressional District, and I was in the legislature for 10 years representing the place that I grew up and now represent here in Congress. I can tell you that coming to Congress and watching the urgent needs in my community and unfortunately the lack of priority here in the House majority has been very frustrating to deal with. And one of those key issues, and the reason why I asked to be on the Financial Services Committee and I'm on the Housing Subcommittee, is the housing crisis. This is an issue that I had not focused on before, but it is something that came up in every community that I went to as the #1 issue that people were facing. My district is suburbs as well as rural Colorado. We have resort communities, and people who have lived in their communities their entire life were getting pushed out as they've seen home values increase, sometimes up to 5-fold in just a couple of years. So we have hit the perfect storm of, we had the recession and the housing crisis early on when I was in my early 20s. Home builders were wiped out and we really reduced the amount of supply that was brought in. And then we have the global pandemic and the economic fallout and consequences from that. And while we have the quickest and strongest recovery in the world, unfortunately, people are still struggling to get by because of rising costs. One of the biggest rising costs has been housing. We have to increase supply. I'm so proud of what Democrats are doing every day to actually bring solutions on this, and it is incredibly frustrating to watch these bills sit on the sidelines instead of being prioritized, heard in committee, and passed on the House floor. I want to thank our Ranking Member Waters for the work and the leadership that you've brought for years. I am hopeful that you will be our chair again soon and we can actually bring these bills. But in the meantime, we're still working on bipartisan legislation and what we can do to bring those private and public investments to increase supply and address the workforce shortage issue. You all know that one of the biggest issues facing employers right now in every sector is the ability to hire the workforce needed. We have a broken immigration system. We have people begging to come here to work, and we don't create the opportunities to fill those voids. It's the #1 thing we could do to address rising costs, and especially when it comes to the construction industry. So I look forward to working alongside my colleagues to bring pragmatic solutions to address the housing crisis. This is something that intersects in every issue that we care about, and it is something that has affected my family personally. My dad lost his house after going through the recession and found himself homeless for numerous years. My mom was had Section 8 housing, and she's one of the lucky ones, and it saved her life. And so I know firsthand how critical it is to have a roof over your head, and I've seen the consequences of failed policy and the lack of opportunity out there for so many people. So I appreciate you all for caring about this issue, and to the members who stand here with me for your priority on this critical issue for Colorado. Oh, sorry. And now I get to bring up, who is next? Congresswoman Garcia. Ramirez already went, or Garcia already went.
Yes,
Sorry.
Ramirez.
There we go.
Hey.
As I say, Homeland Security, Ramirez. My name is Delia Ramirez. I am the Congresswoman of Illinois 3, and I represent the northwest side of the city of Chicago and the northwestern suburbs. 3 years ago, I debated a emergency housing relief bill in the state legislature. It was right after the leadership of Chairwoman Maxine Waters that we were about to get emergency relief assistance and also moratorium on evictions and making sure that people are able to stay in their homes in the midst of the pandemic. As I debated that, I knew that if it weren't for the legislation at the federal level that had passed to provide so much financial assistance, that in the state of Illinois, we would see more than 100,000 people for the very first time experience homelessness. That funding and your leadership literally kept thousands of families in their homes at the most difficult and painful time that we had ever seen for many of us in our entire life. Today, I get to serve in Congress, and I get to see and work alongside so many of my colleagues who are here today, making sure that we remind people that when we come here to work, we actually can bring solutions and create housing security. I look forward to seeing us get into the majority, but I also know that our ranking member doesn't wait until we get to the majority to get things done. And she is creative and she is persistent, and she makes sure that all of us understand that when it comes to housing, it interconnects with everything you and I care about. If it's healthcare, if it's education, if it's mental health, it's getting to the issues of why people are dealing with substance abuse. All of these things are interconnected. And so I'm really grateful for these pieces of legislation. I call all my colleagues to consider co-sponsoring it, because here's the thing. Housing insecurity is not a Democratic issue. It is an American issue. It impacts Democrats, Republicans, independents, children, and those that don't even know what they want to be in a party or if they want to be part of a party. And as I think about the average age of someone experiencing homelessness, what do you think that is? It's 9 years of age. Our responsibility is to our children and to the future of this nation. This legislation will be transformative in ending homelessness, making it easier for people to keep their apartments, preventing homelessness, and helping everyday people finally have that dream of their home. And we have legislation to make that happen. I can't thank Ranking Member Maxine Waters enough. We're going to get it done, because this relentless leader here won't stop until we do. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your patience. I think that we have to leave the room. We'll take a few questions. Yes, sir.
Your former member and Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge, who was the mayor and state legislator, who has worked with LA to get the permits out the way. Now she's worked with Brandon Johnson in Chicago. Is there a way for us to mirror that across the country? Because where the members have relationships, it seems like y'all work better with completing it because you don't have the fight. I love the fact that she went right into LA and went to work because she was a member before. Brandon had that conversation. I was there at the Black Caucus, and he went right back, and now he just last month announced that
Bring Chicago home.
Yeah, they eliminated all the things. And I know I used to live in Vegas, and we had a homeless problem. Thanks to see that you're out there. What can we do to make sure that the red tape is out of the way for even small builders and developers in America?
Well, first of all, thank you so very much for mentioning Marcia Fudge. Great supporter of housing and working hard to get rid of homelessness. But she's doing it in a way that we are trying to get people focused on, working with the locals. Once we send this money from the federal government, the locals get it, and we have to help them decide how to spend this money in ways that's going to get rid of the problem. There are many funding sources, whether we're talking about CDBG? Are we talking about home, et cetera, et cetera? Now we've got to make sure that the mayors and the city councils who are making decisions about how that money gets spent are working closely with us to carry out the mission that we've all said that we support, and that is getting rid of homelessness, creating more housing opportunities, and opening up opportunities for our young people and our millennials and others who cannot afford 20% down to get down payment assistance, fixing up, our public housing that's in great disrepair. In New York, the elevators are not working, the heat's not on, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, she's doing a good job, and that's the way to do it. Somebody come help me get these before I forget. Yes, come right.
A lot of millennials and Gen Z, you just mentioned, folks who read my work, have given up on the American dream, have given up on the idea of going back home. And you mentioned a lot of legislation that you all are working on to push, but what's your message to folks out there who are uninspired, who don't believe that the American dream is attainable anymore, that don't believe that they'll ever be able to maybe inherit a home from a parent, who feel despondent as we head into this election year where energy and motivation is going to be so critical to turning folks out? What's your message to those young people out there who feel as though the vision that you are speaking of is not attainable for them?
You're absolutely correct, and I think we've all experienced that in engaging with our young people, et cetera. But we have a president, and the vice president who was here said this is at the top of the agenda, which really does make us feel very good that they are going to make this a priority. Secondly, we've got to look deeper into what creates homelessness, and we got to deal with health problems, mental health. We've got to deal with not in my backyard. We got to deal with hedge funds and private equity who buy up a lot of places, raise the rent, and then do not put money back into repair, et cetera, et cetera. We got to fix the systems rather than just talk about it. And we've got to call some people out. That includes, again, our banks, our hedge funds, private equity, and others who have too many friends in Congress. We're going to go right down this row and right to the second one. Okay, yes. Oh, we can't, okay.
Thank you, Congressman. I just wanted to ask if you've had any conversations with Chairman Patrick McHenry about any of your plans, housing, and if there's any bipartisan support.
Well, Chairman McHenry is leaving, and we have a decent relationship. And of course, I talk with him all the time about housing. The Republicans are not interested necessarily in investing in housing. Well, I think he really does care. They have the kind of operation that their decisions come from the top down. And, Trump does not care about homelessness at all. He's talking about locking up people who are sleeping on the streets. So I don't have any real commitments, but I have the opportunity to talk with him and engage him as we take on this new approach to dealing with getting rid of what is wrong with the systems and the funding. So I'm optimistic. Yes, sir.
Is there anything that the administration can do? You mentioned redlining earlier still being an issue. Is there anything, and I don't think this is necessarily HUD, it's either probably CFPB or DOJ, what more can be done by the administration to deal with redlining, particularly I think in the mortgage market and
Okay, would you like to take this?
Yeah. That, under the chair's leadership and working with the Congressional Black Caucus and others, we've identified executive actions that this administration has taken. I think it's important that we remind people where we've come from since this pandemic, and the fact that, again, because of the investments that helped keep people in their homes, avoiding eviction, and the amount of support that was provided to individuals to pay their rent so that they didn't get evicted. I'm experiencing that right now in North Las Vegas. We had those protections during those executive actions that the administration took, but they've been lifted by most of these governors, right, and local governments. And that's why I think what the chairwoman is doing to really look deep into what's happening on the local level, That's how we're going to fix the systemic issues. Yes, the administration can and will do more as we identify it, but there's a lot of things we can be doing right now if local government works with us to make these reforms and to streamline the process.
I'm just curious though, because some of the issues that you're talking about sometimes go directly to some of the regulations that have been imposed upon municipalities as well as state legislatures, whether it's zoning regulations, regulations imposed on by state legislatures, also insurance premiums, some of the crime rates that have been going on with the insurers are like, look, we can't afford this either. We have to leave the market. So, you know, the cost of building houses have gotten way too expensive. So, you know, it's also, you know, the cost of houses have gotten way too expensive as well. So people just can't afford to even get into those houses. Why is it that it has to be a federal decision as opposed to just whether a local or a state decision as well? Can you talk about that?
Would you like to join me? Anyone? Let me just get started with this. There are, like you said, 101 things that get in the way of producing affordable housing. And whether you're talking about, you know, what is happening at the local level, the other kinds of problems that cities and states have that they've got to deal with, let me suggest to you, none are more important than housing. If you don't have a safe and secure place to live, you can't deal with the problems of your family. You can't engage government. And so we believe that housing, affordable housing, decent housing is a right. And because we believe so deeply in it, not only we going to do legislation, work with the administration and the president, and work on the locals so that we can get the price of building housing down. Just an example, when the locals negotiate with so-called affordable housing developers, they can help decrease that cost or increase it. Sometimes the requirements to change the wiring in the neighborhood, to remove a fire hydrant, all of these things add to the cost. And so in Los Angeles, right now, the cost of affordable units is $500,000 to produce. That's ridiculous. We got to get the prices down. We know some of that had to do with supply because of COVID, et cetera, but that has changed significantly. We have other things that we need to do, as was said, systemic things that we can work on. Yes, we're going to get right down the line. They said we got to get out of here. One more. Oh, my goodness. Stand up, please, so we can hear you.
I wanted to ask firstly, this initiative you mentioned working with local officials, folks have pointed out the federal government is more of a subsidizer, whereas the local governments play more of a regulatory role. I'm curious what that engagement would look like with local officials. And then secondly, zoning politics can get pretty heated in the suburbs on the local level. Former President Trump in the last election had a line in every stump speech about how Democrats wanted to eliminate single-family home zoning. You've got some frontliners up here. Are you concerned about potential political backlash, as you mentioned, you know, around eliminating restricted zoning?
Not only are we concerned about it, we're going to do something about it. It is very, very important that we let none of these issues get in the way of our determination to get affordable, decent, secure housing for the people of this country. Many of you who are sitting in this room right now, not only do you see it in your daily lives as everybody else, it's affecting some of you. Some of you are doing well, but not well enough to buy a house yet. Not well enough to live where you want to live because the rent is too high. And so, yes, there are going to be political problems, but we're politicians. And so politicians should know how to fight politically. And that's what we're going to do in addition to all the other things that we're doing. We're still trying to carry out Dodd-Frank, that got rid of predatory lending for the most part. But yes, we understand that we're confronted with a lot of difficult issues, but we're determined. That's why we're talking with you today. We want you to help carry this message. We want you to join us in this fight. I know you are confronted with a lot of other issues that you have to pay attention to, whether it's what's going on in the Red Sea, or what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in the Middle East. But we want you to give this some attention, not only for the people that we're so desperately trying to get off the street, but for you and your families to come, because a lot of you haven't started yet, but you will. Thank you very much. We have to go now. Thank you, thank you, thank you.